Time for a regular feature on the show, the Sunday newspapers. But today we're doing things a little differently. We're taking a look at the papers in Zimbabwe. Aldrin Sampier in Harare, it's over to you.
News happens fast. Stories break all the time. It's hard to keep track. That's why we bring you the top stories of the past 7 days in just half an hour. Catch up with Week in One.
It's the electoral process heading up to who will be... Well, welcome to Zimbabwe in Harare. This is where we are coming to you live, counting down the minutes and the hours heading up to the elections, the historic elections on the 30th of July, where thousands will be heading out to the various polls. About 5.5 million Zimbabweans have registered to take part in these historic elections that will be taking place tomorrow. As we've been indicating, 3 ballot papers that they'll be given. One for the presidential candidate, the other for members of parliament, and the third one for the local authorities. But the one that most people will be focusing on is the one about the presidential candidates. 23 presidential candidates on the ballot paper. 1 presidential candidate has already pulled out. Who will emerge victorious after the Electoral Commission announces the results, which are expected to be announced by the 4th of August. And looking at some of the papers, it absolutely comes as no surprise, just looking at the papers here, is that the papers are all running with the elections that are coming up. And just look at the Daily News on Sunday. It has the faces of 8 presidential candidates, 23 presidential candidates on the ballot paper. And this is some issue that we probably will be delving into as well, is the ability of the various media institutions to cover all 23 candidates, but also all the other political key role players in these presidential elections. Looking at the Sunday Times here in Zimbabwe, the Sunday Times running with Zimbabwe's historic election. Let the people decide, quite an important story about a possibility of a runoff and whether the person who emerges not victorious and who might suffer a blow will accept the outcome of the results. And you have the Daily News with the faces of the various presidential candidates, as well as the Sunday Mail, which has something special is brewing, quoting the president of Zimbabwe, who's also the leader of ZANU-PF. He was delivering that message at the final rally of the ZANU-PF ahead of the polls. As we know that here in Zimbabwe, 24 hours before the polls, all campaigning has to stop. Well, to help us look into some of these stories in the various newspapers, I'm now joined by Jeffrey Moyo, who is an international freelance journalist, as well as Foster Dongozo, the Secretary General of the Zimbabwean Union of Journalists, and as you've indicated earlier on as well, an award-winning journalist. Thank you guys so much for joining us this morning. Foster, let me start with you first. Just looking through some of the papers, what is the story that has caught your attention?
Well, the story that has caught my attention is the one in the Sunday Times, Zimbabwe's historic election. Very historic indeed, in the sense that it's the first election in which former President Robert Mugabe is not a candidate. It's also historic in the sense that for the first time in about 20 years, former MDC President Morgan Tsvangirai is not a candidate. It's also historic in the sense that it comes on the back of a revolution of some sort in the form of the military intervention that took place in November last year. And hence, I like the title, Let the People Decide.
Very important. Very important. It also speaks to who holds the power in determining whether there will be a turning point for Zimbabwe or not.
Yes, but again, the question has been asked, after voting, can the people decide anything? Mm-hmm. And this is the discussion that I think has been going on in some sectors to say because the stakes are very high, the expectations are very high, and therefore the question keeps arising in private discussions: who is going to blink first? Is anybody prepared to hand over or surrender power, or who is anybody prepared to allow the other party to take over power?
Yeah, and accept defeat.
Yes.
And just quickly, just looking at the front page of the Sunday Times, you have a picture here of people attending the ZANU-PF. There's a ZANU-PF rally. On the other side, you have a picture of people attending the MDC rally. And both of these rallies were taking place in Harare, although a few kilometers apart from each other. But at some point in the city center, you had both members from different political parties in the city center, but there was no fighting at all.
Yes, and again, I think this speaks to the Zimbabwean culture or the Zimbabwean personality. I also went around different places last night during the day, and I was able to witness supporters from ZANU-PF and the MDC making merry together, eating together, drinking together. And so for me, really, that is not totally surprising, because that is the Zimbabwean sort of culture. Generally, the people are not violent or violent towards each other. The violence is induced more often than not by political parties or by political players who urge them to fight against each other. But generally, and again, the point that you bring up, that it can't be more than 5 kilometers apart. Thousands upon thousands of supporters from different political parties. The rallies, the last star rallies taking place within a few kilometers of each other. No known or reported or extreme cases of violence. And I think that for me is a plus, in the sense that it actually indicates that among ordinary Zimbabweans, the idea of violence towards another Zimbabwean is anathema.
Well, even the police have indicated that the environment remains conducive for a peaceful election. Jeffrey, what story has caught your attention?
Well, in the Daily News, Zimbabwe decides as ED Chamisa engage in show of force. The two rallies that took place at the same time. That story really caught my eye. Yes, I saw the rallies yesterday. The rally, Mnangagwa's rally at the National Sports Stadium. But evidently there were buses that had ferried supporters there, villagers that had been taken to the ED rally, Mnangagwa's rally there. But also evidently at the Chamisa rally, I didn't see any buses that had brought in supporters. An indication that those supporters probably came on their own. They used their own transport, and they were willing to be in that.
And I think that's the significant thing about these two rallies, because at the ZANU-PF rally there were buses and trucks, truckloads of people that attended the rally, and of course coming from various areas, whereas at this rally what you saw mostly were private cars.
Yes, I saw plenty of private cars and taxis. An indication that the people that gathered at the MDC Alliance rally came on their own will. They were not forced to come at this rally. They were not transported by the party, unlike what happened at the ZANU-PF rally at the National Sports Stadium. I can tell you, I saw villagers being dropped along Samora Machel in town early in the morning. I was in town. I saw villagers, some of them from Mashonaland, East Mashonaland Central Province. You could tell that these people were not any of them were from Harare. They were just villagers who had been forced to come to attend the rally at the ZANU-PF at the National Sports Stadium here. So it was not on their own will.
Let me ask both of you this question, and Foster, let's start with you. So you have these two huge rallies taking place simultaneously, but Emmerson Mnangagwa, the president of Zimbabwe and the leader of ZANU-PF, I think finished his speech just a couple of minutes before Nelson Chamisa had started. And ZANU-PF's rally was live on the public broadcasters at BC. But when Nelson Chamisa started speaking, it was as if it's not even taking place when you switched on your TV and you tried to put on ZBC.
Well, obviously, I was actually out in the field checking out the rallies, not being much aware of the schedules that the national broadcaster had for broadcasting the rallies, if at all. And I think these are some of the issues that have emerged around who gets to have their rallies broadcast, who gets to get their events broadcast live on television. So the issue about having access to the national broadcaster is one of the contentious issues that have always emerged over the years. It's unlike in other places whereby people really try to give access to the public broadcaster. But certainly in this case and in our country, in Zimbabwe, it's one of the issues that has always been a contentious issue, particularly from the opposition, demanding and requesting that they get access to the public broadcaster. Yeah. But of course, there have been questions as to, well, for example, Mnangagwa, is he, at which point do you say is the president?
He's speaking. He's speaking as as leader of ZANU-PF, or president of the country. But
certainly yesterday was speaking as
ZANU-PF leader. Yes. Jeffrey, just before we go to a quick ad break, your take on this, because it also plays out in the newspapers as well, and the Herald, quite to be specific, where you have story after story that actually focuses on some of the achievements of the president. President Emmerson Mnangagwa, and it's almost like the MDC alliance doesn't exist unless if there is an attack on the MDC alliance.
Yes, that speaks volume on the part of the state media in the way it covers, it undermines all the activities or all the rallies that the opposition has always held in this country. They've always pressed it down. They've always made sure that it doesn't get enough voice, enough space to air its rallies, to be seen in public. But when it is doing something bad, or something bad is done by an opposition politician, then it gains mileage in the state broadcaster, because it's the ZANU-PF system that is in control of the state machinery.
Well, after the break, we continue our discussion about the Zimbabwean elections, and we'll then focus on the role of journalists in covering these elections and how difficult or how easier it may have been over the past few months after the former leader of Zimbabwe was dethroned and forced to resign. Some say that it has been a bit easier for journalists to move around and do their work. We've seen as well with the campaigning as well. And yesterday, Emmerson Mnangagwa was saying that if you look at the environment has been very peaceful. It has created a democratic space even for the various political parties to campaign. We'll look more into that after this quick break.